Hi, welcome to the Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Today's video is called Released in 1992 and on vinyl. So I'm going to be looking at 8 hard rock, hair metal albums released in 1992 that also had a vinyl release. Of course, 1992, this genre of music is becoming less popular, but also so is the vinyl format. It's also becoming less popular, and so there's pressings and more CDs of an album are being released instead of vinyl. So some of these albums I'm going to show you today are not very easy to find or quite expensive to buy if you want to get them now. So the first one I wanted to show you from a very successful solo artist. This album, released in 1992, didn't get much publicity at all. In fact, it took me a few years after it was released until I even realised that it existed. And it is Joan Jett and the Blackhearts and Notorious. And it's a fantastic album, some great tracks. Backlash, Ashes in the Wind, Lie to Me is possibly my favourite Joan Jett song. Really good. Desmond Child helped out with songwriting like he had on the previous album. The previous album had been very successful, but this one not so much. But that's not a reflection of the quality of the songs, I think, on this album. Not an easy one to get on vinyl, but worth tracking down, and definitely, however, even if it's not on vinyl, it's an album worth getting if you are a fan of Joan Jett. So, like I say, it didn't get a lot of publicity, so you may not even know about that one. Which was a bit surprising. Joan Jett, big name, but at least in 1992, I had no idea that had come out. Alright, so next band is a group called Hardline. Now, they released Eclipse in 1992. This features, of course, Neil Schon from Journey on guitar. This particular pressing is a Korean pressing. I didn't have this on vinyl back in the day. In fact, a lot of these albums that I'm showing you from 1992, back in 1992 I wasn't able to get them on vinyl. I may have picked them up on CD or cassette, but once I got back into collecting vinyl again, I wanted to try and track this down, and Korean pressings one way you could get some of these albums that perhaps weren't released on vinyl in other areas or are very difficult to find. And Hardline, of course, are still releasing albums. Neil Schon not part of the lineup though. Alright. Now this one here, a band that had been very successful up to this point. Sorry, that's a train going by. You might hear that from time to time on my videos because the Rock and Metal Invasion Studios also happen to back onto a train track. So that train track is right behind me here, so apologies for that. Alright, so this is a well-known band, and this is their third album. It is called Dog Eat Dog, and the band is called Warrant. Now, a lot of people like this album, but in 1992, after the success of Cherry Pie, you might have thought things would just carry on and they would have another successful album, a little bit similar to Slaughter, who'd also had that I showed, of course. I showed Slaughter on my last video. They'd been very successful with their previous album, but their 1992 album, The Wildlife, did not match the sales of the previous album, and this one did not as well. Even though more mature songwriting, some great songs on here, and like I say, a number of people do like this album. But yeah, sure, it's different to Cherry Pie, I suppose. It's still got some elements those classic sort of that classic sort of Warrant sound on some of the songs, but It's a great album. I much prefer this to their debut, and Cherry Pie definitely was from in my opinion was a big improvement over the debut, and it just kept sort of carried on. I think with this album, good album. This is another Korean pressing, so One Way I was able to get that on vinyl. And not an easy one to track down on vinyl if you want to hear this on vinyl. Alright, another one that people might not be aware had a vinyl release, and a slightly obscure band, but they did release albums after this, and they have a female vocalist. Nina Ellis is her name, and the band is called Sku Siskin, and this is self-titled album from 1992. So, not a very well-known band. I remember when this did come out. I remember seeing this coming out in 1992. But yeah, it didn't have a lot of success. I'm not too sure about the album cover. I'm not sure if that would have helped them. If the Walls Could Talk, a video was done for that, and that's a great song. But it's also the kind of song that in 1992 perhaps wasn't going to be successful, like it might have been in 1989 or 1990, for example. But yeah, like I say, they did also go on and then release albums after this, and I think had a reasonable following, at least in Europe. But when this was released in 1992, it didn't get a lot of attention. But so I was happy to get this up, pick this up on vinyl, because it's not an easy one to find. Alright, next one is another slightly obscure band that people may not have heard of, but definitely worth checking out if you like bands like Bonfire. This is Rocco, and this is their second album, Open Invitation. Released in 1992, and very similar to their debut album, their first album that was released prior to this one. Very similar, and yeah, good hard rock. I like the fact that they didn't change their sound. Some bands, when it was getting into 1992, and of course even after that, did sort of start changing their sound a little bit to try and fit in. But this is pretty similar to their first album. Next one is TNT and Realized Fantasies. Their previous album was Intuition, which, to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of. And this one I thought was a little bit better. Rock and Roll Away is the standout track for me on this. The rest of it is so-so. I much preferred their mid-80s, their debut album. I can't remember what year it came out. The debut album that they released with Tony Harnell, and the one after that. So those first two albums with Tony Harnell as the vocalist, they're my favourites. But nice to have this in the collection, and not an easy one to pick up on vinyl. It has been re-released on vinyl, and that's interesting that some of these 1992 heavy metal albums, hard rock albums that were released in 1992 are now getting a re-release, or do get re-released, but not all of them. And that is one that did. Another one that got a re-release, and they were actually quite successful and popular in 1992. So this is a rare example of a band putting out an album, their debut album in 1992, would, I think, fit the hair metal category, as well as pretty much any of the other bands that I've shown. But they had a successful album, and this is Jackal. And again, this album has been re-released. This is the Music on Vinyl re-release. came out, I think, 2019. I did also have the original release of this as well. I had to pick that up because I like this album so much. I Stand Alone, kick-ass song that opens up the album. The Lumberjack was quite a successful song off this album. That basically helped this album get some pretty good sales and become quite a popular band. And of course, they've carried on releasing albums since this debut album. So good album. And I think it's interesting to think that this is a band releasing their debut album in 1992. They were successful. So sometimes, people would say, and I would probably say it as well, that, a good album, if it had been released in 1989, it would have been successful. But it was released in 1992, so it was too late. But here we go, 1992, successful. Granted, I think the key thing that helped Jackal be successful was that they didn't take themselves too seriously. So they kind of had a bit of they were kind of having some fun. And some of those other hair metal bands took themselves perhaps a little bit too seriously, and I think that wasn't quite so cool by the time we got through to 1992. I guess you could look at another band that I will show later on another video, Ugly Kid Joe. Their debut album also came out in 1992. It was also successful, and again, another example of a band that didn't take themselves too seriously, but they totally would fit the hard rock, hair metal genre. Alright, last one for today in this video is the second album from Giant. This is Time to Burn. Last of the Runaways was their debut album. They had a hit single off that album. This was their follow-up album. Very similar to the debut. Fantastic songs on here. I guess it's that sort of hard rock AOR type sound. Dan Huff, of course, the guitarist. Fantastic guitarist. And they've just released quite recently a new album. Dan Huff's not really a member of the band anymore, but he does feature on one of the songs on guitar. And the drummer, David Huff, is still a member of the band. I think the new lineup is quite different. But yeah, fantastic album, and released in 1992, but didn't come anywhere close to meeting the sales of their previous album. And really, that sort of AOR hard rock sound was just not particularly popular in 1992. And they broke up or disbanded for a while after that, but then did return later on in the 90s and have released a few albums from time to time since then. Alright, that'll do it for this video. So there's 8 albums from 1992 that were released on vinyl, and believe it or not, I've still got some more to show, so there will be at least a couple more parts to come. This is the end of part 2. Alright, bye for now.